As soon as I finished talking to Amarante, I couldn't help remembering the lyrics of one of my all-time favorite Rush songs, which says, "And the men who hold high places must be the ones who start to mold a new reality, closer to the heart, closer to the heart." The blacksmith and the artist reflected it in their art. They forge their creativity closer to the heart, closer to the heart. Packaging design should seduce, inform, and even save the planet. I'm BRANDERMAN, and this is BRANDERMAN, the podcast where I talk with experts to uncover what it actually takes to make a positive impact on consumers, the market, and society. Warning: keep this podcast out of the reach of close-minded marketers and designers. Before the interview, let me introduce my design agency.
Brands with purpose. Human, agile, honest brands that leave no one indifferent. Tridimage creates and revitalizes brands to imagine and shape the future. Tridimage, the branding and packaging design agency for bold brands.
Today I had the pleasure to speak with Amarante, a Brazilian designer and currently Senior Creative Director and Head of Brand Design at Danone North America. Fe has extensive experience in brand building, consumer brands, identity development, and brand world creation, alongside life skills around acting as a diplomat and interpreter between business and creative languages. In this episode, we discuss why bringing a human approach to the way creative ideas are born, nurtured, and grown is key to achieving great design solutions. She also explains why a lot of times the design logic doesn't follow the consumer feeling, and shares with me why she thinks the client agency model is broken and the potential solutions to fix it. Fe has crafted and reimagined packaging identity systems and brand worlds for global iconic brands. Today with me, Fe Amarante. Each of us is a container of ideas, projects, and dreams. However, we can't read the label when we are inside the jar. Fe, what do you think your label says, or what would you like it to say?
That's such a cool question. I don't know how I would have answered it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but now I think creating, imagining everything. I'm not only creating and imagining, identity systems or packaging design projects, none of that, but also just thinking and creating and imagining different realities in different ways that, I don't know, what we do can happen, what we do can take place. So that's what I think I would like for it to say. And it's probably going to come with a lot of doodles and a lot of different little line work pieces. And that's what it would do.
That sounds great. Building a brand is like a journey. It starts with defining where we are and asking ourselves where we want to go. What was the path that led you from studying graphic design in Brazil to reimagining brands worlds for the Hershey company to now leading the design vision at Danone North America?
Oh God, can it take me like a week to explain that, or we have a time clock?
We have a time.
Okay, so back then, what was interesting, and I still remember this very clearly. I remember there was one class in my design school. My professor's name was Samuel Ehrlich, and he was teaching this class. I created this book, and I had designed this book with poetry from my late aunt that was something very touching to me. And I remember presenting that project to my classmates, made me cry. It was a very emotional time for me. I remember very clearly that the thing that I had created had value, but the story about the thing that I had created had almost the same, if not bigger value than the thing itself. as I continued on design school and internships and jobs, I landed my first kind of big agency job at RC Comunicação back in Belo Horizonte. She was like one of the biggest, if not the biggest at the time, advertising agency in my city. And I remember always, again, crafting design, crafting art, crafting the thing, but the story around the thing was always the most important. I remember presenting to clients, and yes, there was the conversation about, the typography or the color or the shape, but there was always the story about what would that feel? How would that look? And the shapes and colors, how would they translate into stories and feel and emotion and the background of the story? That led me to always be more interested in what is the story behind it than the shape or the color or the graphic solution itself anyway. So I think there was a right mix of luck and opportunity. And I moved to the US in 2009. By then, I had my fair share of agency and freelance work. I had worked as a brand strategist for a design studio that I loved and had at that time then amassed a fair number of big projects like big branding, identity systems, some packaging. I think I was able to very early on speak to my interest in the story and the beating heart of the brand versus the actual tactical solution. When I moved to the US, I don't know, like I think at this point in your career that, in the design industry, never piss anyone off. Never, ever, ever, ever. Just be nice, be a nice person, generally speaking, and that will already be a huge thing for you. But also never, ever say no to a recruiter giving you a call, even if you're not the right fit for the position. And that happened when I was in Hershey. A recruiter called me. She and I had spoken about something that was totally the wrong fit for me. It was just something that it didn't really look like what I wanted to do. And she came to me with this, hey, I'm looking for a contractor for a design manager role at a large consumer goods company located in the Hershey, Pennsylvania area. You have not been to Hershey, Pennsylvania, if I assume, is that correct?
No.
It's pretty impossible that would not be the Hershey company. There are no large companies in Hershey that is not the Hershey company. So when she said that, I started laughing a little bit. I'm like, that's interesting. It gave me a chance to be at a side of the design industry, the design story that I had never been. I was never before in the client side. I had never seen what looks like inside of those curtains. And I decided to give it a try. And I think a lot of, honestly, Anand, like it was a lot of being really, really open to what it could be throughout my entire career. I think the common theme had been to have an open heart and to be open to the possibility of what it could be. And by that time, my husband and I had built our dream home in Pennsylvania. We had designed it ourselves from scratch. We loved that house. And we had those sidebar conversations about the only way we would move would be if we would move to Colorado, because we were both just fascinated with the mountains and the peaks and just the landscape. I think the best way I can describe it was serendipity. The job was up at a time where we came here to Colorado for a wedding. And I started talking with Danone. And 6 weeks later, I was packing up my house and packing up to move. And it was a lot of people that I had met throughout my career at the Hershey company and in agencies that had worked with and for me at the time had known people here at Danone, the brands, the industry, the mission, the largest benefit corporation in the world. All of those kind of spoke to me. But I also think all of the things that I wanted to do, I wanted to build a different team. I wanted to build a different approach to design. I believe there is the need for a human approach to creativity, a human, real approach to creative direction. There is a lot in there that I think Danone also felt like they were looking for that at the time I was talking with them.
Fe, your background includes experience in advertising, in branding and design agencies, as well as consumer brand corporation. What do you understand about design now from inside a large corporation that you didn't understand before when you were on the agency side?
I think from an agency, we don't realize how incredibly vulnerable and how in need of creative love clients at the marketing side really are. I don't think we understand how much their day to day and their lives is filled with so many challenges that creatives can somehow express solutions through art and imagery. And there's just so much imagination that goes into our craft. I think we feel everyone works like that and they don't. It's kind of like, not everyone gets to spend their entire livelihood thinking about how to make stories and how to express them through visual storytelling, through shapes and languages and icons. And not everyone gets to do that. It feels to me like we need a reminder sometimes that the humanity that goes into the business of doing business is very restricted compared to the humanity that goes into creative and the humanity that goes into what we do. Like we get to spend our days in the craft of the creative while inside of a client, that's not the case. I remember having that gut feeling in the beginning of my career, but now it's kind of like fully forged itself into a full system of beliefs is that we're here to help on something that they have no idea, tools, or resources to do themselves. And when I see them, like the client, the internal marketing partner, the internal brand partner, they are seeking to our knowledge, to our magic, to the way we think, to come in and do something that they cannot do themselves. And that's to me the biggest thing that I hope more young designers get to realize earlier in their careers. I feel I realized it early enough, but I still wish that it was earlier than I did,
What do you miss from the agency life, and what do you love about the in-house design environment?
I miss the smallness of the agency life. I miss being able to go through an office or a couple of offices and literally everyone that works there. In the client side, specifically at Hershey and at Danone, which is even bigger, you're never going to meet everyone. You're never going to meet all tens of thousands of people that work there. It's just too big. You won't be able to do that. I miss having the ability to make decisions based on that smallness of a team. So the workspace can be whatever it feels right for that team. The work environment, the tools, you don't need to go through corporate IT and corporate finance and approve this one thing. Like it's all much more flexible in the sense of tailoring what's going to work for your small team of 10, 50, 100 people. But what happens in this large corporate environment that does not happen at the agency side is I get access to the people actually making the decisions for those brands. And I actually get to build design credibility and have firsthand conversations with senior VPs, C-level players. And that gets me really, really, really close to the beating heart of the brand. I don't have to guess what the pipeline of innovation for brand X, Y, and Z is because I actually get to talk with the innovation leader for that brand and talk about it. And then I can think about, okay, if my identity system for brand X and Y and Z needs to fit this type of offering for now, this type of offering for 2025, and that type of offering for 2030, then I can be much more intentional about building an ecosystem for that brand that allows for that kind of growth to happen. In the agency, it's just really hard to have that visibility and to have that access because clients are only able to transpire as much. You have to be living and breathing with the brands to be able to actually gain that kind of like second nature, like living through and understanding. And that to me is something that is absolutely priceless in being in this side of the aisle here.
Super interesting. I guess you lead a group of in-house designers. What's the life of designers from the other side of the barrier?
It's very fast-paced. There are a few things that are very similar. We have crits the same way any agency would have. We have very fierce critiques, very fierce internal reviews. We critique each other's work. We build on each other's work. We think it through together. We look through the work. There is all of that. We build prototypes. We pin things on the wall. We do all those things. All of those, same thing. The difference is, I think, we're very hands-on in the sense that it's a small team. It's not a giant team. We have 3 creatives per business unit on average. So we do still work with agencies, and those creatives, they have their hands in everything. We have major brands going through major redesigns. They're working on paths and territories for that. We have established existing brands doing line extensions. They're also working on those side by side with other agencies. So it's a different life simply for the fact that they get to put their hands on everything across a brand versus waiting for the client to give them the project. We're kind of like almost like self-initiated. The brand team comes to us, we can automatically and almost instantaneously start a project if it is in the plan for the year. So it's very intense. It's very fast-paced. There's a lot of FaceTime with the internal clients. So a designer that works in my team is facing with a marketing brand manager or a brand director on a very regular basis. So there is an expectation of presentation and arguments and defending the work in ways that a lot of times in the agency, they only get to do that when they get to a more senior level, to a more maybe a brand director, a design director level or so. So those are some of the kind of like differences and similarities, if you will.
What are the best and the most difficult parts of being a design leader within a major multinational company?
Some of the parts that I love the most about my job are also the most challenging parts of my job. As an example, I love being able to be at the beating heart of the brand, of being like right there with senior decision makers, to be able to be in those rooms, in those conversations. But also you get to see the things sometimes don't move as fast as you would wish they could. They oftentimes move faster than what you expect, slower than what you would wish for. It's an exercise of patience almost on a daily basis. There are weeks that I come and I'm like, oh my goodness, can we move slower with this? It's like, this is not ever ending. But a lot of times it's because we get to have visibility to the parts that agencies oftentimes don't have visibility, which is all the back and forth inside, all the different conversations and negotiation that has to happen for something to go from point A to point B to point C. Some of those are challenging and complicated. And the second thing is just, the corporate environment has red tape, has bureaucracy. It has all of the ingredients that a lot of agencies, have agility and fast-paced environment and all of that. We move really fast, but oftentimes we find roadblocks and we find the real challenges that have, we also have the ongoing timelines are not ever long enough. Budgets are not ever rich enough. I don't think they will ever be for anyone. Every single side of being an agency and being in the corporate environment, the pros and the cons are sides of the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, of course. What, in your opinion, sets apart a great packaging designer from a good one?
I am going to push back on your question because I believe there's no such thing as a designer that is only a packaging designer. I think a great designer that creates unbelievably amazing packaging and design systems and design language. The key distinction there is seeing the story behind it, being able to, this is not just a square or a circle, this is not just a color or a star or a leaf or a splash or a piece of coconut or a piece of almond. It is part of a bigger story. What they're doing is maybe say 5 pieces of the puzzle, and the puzzle is 100 pieces. And they're able to see the 5 pieces that they're doing, but they're also able to bring back the vision, the 40,000 foot view of what happens at the 100-piece level. And that to me is a quality for a creative in the year of 2021, even more so and beyond, that can understand that their packaging is going to live on a shelf. And some people are going to take photos of that packaging in their fridge. They're going to post on Instagram. They're going to see TikTok, someone interacting with the brand. So there is a whole ecosystem of equities that packaging design can help build. And it's always an exercise of being able to zooming in and zooming out, because you can't, as you told me, you're in industrial and visual design, you can't lose track that that bottle shape that you're crafting requires you to spend hours upon hours just looking at that bottle shape, right? To think about all the gestures, to think about all the crevices. You can't lose track of that. That needs craft and intention. But you also need to think about what's happening on the shelf set, what's happening when someone holds that and takes a picture, what happens when. So all of that, what happens is what discerns to me an average creative to a great creative.
And now, what defines a great design agency for you?
So many things. No ego, willingness to share everything from design files to opinions to feelings. I don't believe in black boxes. I believe in hyper collaborative environments where I get to build everything with them. They get to build everything with us. My design team, my designers, my creatives get to be in the project, in the files, in everything together. Greatest design agency collaborations that I've seen happening at Danone since I started have had those components and those ingredients of zero ego. Everything's about the work. We suffer sometimes together too. We debate together. We take credit together. We go to war together. We fight for the work together. We also don't split hairs between whose role is what. It is very much clear that it is one creative team working together. There's no client agency relationship for us anymore. There is one big creative team. And that's, to me, something that has been incredibly important, especially in COVID times.
Yeah. What is the agency black box that you mentioned?
You know, that agency environment where the client gives the brief and the agency goes away and nothing happens. And then 3 to 4 weeks later, there's round one. And that round one, I may, as a design leader in the client side, I may see a work in progress. And then there's round two. Between round one and round two, there is also that hiatus, that whole period of time where I see nothing. That is what I call the black box. And then there's also the mystique around the creative is so far away you can't even touch it. It's something that is completely unattainable by anyone. I believe that's also part of this black box model of what we do is unachievable, unattainable, that you can't even get close to it. I come from a school of thought that everyone has a creative soul in themselves. They might have learned really early on in their lives that they should not be coloring outside of the lines, but they, I'm positive, can understand with some coaching and some guidance what it is. But especially with my team, the black box doesn't work because we believe in collaboration and being able to permeate the notion of being the closest thing to the beating heart of the brand to being part of a design team that has an agency component, that has an in-house component that allows for so much richness of thought.
At Danone North America, Fe leads a team of in-house creatives and design strategists with heart, soul, and love. Fe strongly believes that great creative comes from creative hearts that feel seen. What is the biggest design challenge you have faced so far at Danone North America, and how did you overcome it?
If you asked me before I started, what do you think is going to be your biggest challenge? I would never have guessed that my biggest challenge at Danone North America has been designing a team in this time, designing a team that can flourish at a time of uncertainty, can stick together when we were all in the lockdown phase and we didn't know what was happening, and all the feelings and all the emotions were, you could cut the air with a butter knife. How do you inspire, build, and continue to move a team when you have no idea how long you're going to be in hyper crisis mode? No one teaches you what to do in that case. So that to me was the biggest thing that I had to deal with. Every single design project, creative project has been an order of magnitude easier than the challenge of inspire my team, have them feeling like they belonged to a home, to a place that creativity was free and fluid and they had permission to create. That has been the biggest thing.
What management style does a design leader require within its kind of corporations?
Bringing your human in. It's not a corporate management style. I don't know that it will ever be an official stance of style anywhere. It is ultra honest, hyper upfront, not going in circles, bringing your humanity in, not pretending that you have it all together when no one has it together in a time of crisis like that, and owning it, asking for help when needed, and making decisions when needed as well. I think the kind of design leader that I am is me. The person that I am right now as leading this team is very similar to the person I am being a wife to my husband or being a friend to my friends or being a daughter to my parents. There's very little distinction in the way that I conduct it, which is honesty, upfront conversations, a hell lot of love and kindness, because right now there's just so much still to be known. There's still so much that we don't know we're going to be in this new normal, that I am not going to sit here and pretend that I know everything. And my team knows that.
I heard you talking about designing in a human-centric way. How can we co-create with consumers without falling in a rear view mirror trap?
That's a great question. I think it's using the co-creation phase as inspiration and not as an evaluation tool. So it's less about going where they like and more about really listening to what they're saying and finding the little nuggets in there. You know, those moments when you're seeing a group of consumers talking about something and then you hear them say the one thing, and that one thing just gives you like this chill on your spine and this thing on your neck. And you're like, oh my God, what did they say? Did you see it? Did you read it? Did you listen to it? And using that as the inspiring muse of your process versus working so that they curate from where you're going. So it's that flipping of using what they bring to you as input versus using them as a test for the output.
What kind of actual research you do to receive that kind of insights? It's ethnography, focus group.
All of it, which has been really challenging at COVID times, right? Because it's been a lot of Zoom, very long days. We've been experimenting with a very iterative approach to design, utilizing some of the inspired by the tech world and the startup world and thinking about sprints and agile and incorporating that into thinking about brand design and package design and design systems for consumer brands. We have been successfully so working very closely with our insights team to deliver a really interesting way of approaching this work that gives us a very clear iterating and prototyping for a number of days or a number of weeks. And then we're in learning, immersing ourselves with consumer mode. And then we're there for like days, just listening, understanding, questioning, watching how they interact, and then going back and iterating again, and then refining, going back to the consumer group. So we have been doing that in less of a traditional fashion. It's been super interesting to be able to unlock the insights and what we hear in those opportunities with consumers as inspiration, not as validation or as trying to choose from the options. It's less about that. And it's more about being able to listen and being inspired by it.
I imagine you have been involved in the redesign of renowned brands. What is the biggest mistake you see CPG brands make when redesigning their brands and packaging? Is there a story you would like to share?
Back when I was at Hershey, we redesigned the entire portfolio for Reese's, including the Reese's seasonal portfolio. At the time, we were absolutely confident that we needed to unify the seasonal language for Reese's in a way that felt, expecting and interesting and almost like wanting to create a red cup of Starbucks approach and effect for the Reese's brand at the time, with other brands in the Hershey company being part of it as well. We neglected to understand that part of the solution that we came up with, which was fundamentally adding a lot of color to an experience that was mostly orange on shelf, truly caused consumers to lose where the product was. That happened where Reese's consumers are fanatics. They're insane, loving, fanatic, fandom, love the brand like it's nobody's business people. And for them not to find this brand in a Easter time or in a Halloween time or in a Valentine's time is a really big deal. So later we actually redid that experience and we came up with a design language that was far more brand centric and far more intuitive and way more orange on shelf, which then made a whole difference in the world so that consumers could find everything. They were excited to see it. A lot of times the design logic doesn't follow the consumer feeling. A lot of times, just because something rationally makes sense, it doesn't necessarily mean that when consumers feel it and experience it, it will make sense, because consumers don't make sense. We are consumers. None of the stuff that we do when we're purchasing something exactly makes sense when we're talking about the aisles and the shelves in the store. I think the amount of criteria you apply on thinking and rationalizing how you would buy a house is very different than, buying a bar of chocolate. So the reason and the rationale and the logic behind a design system sometimes can overburden what the story and the emotion and what happens when people feel so passionate about something. So that is a big mistake that I think has a lot to do with understanding the equities, understanding what's the most powerful, and always going for what's going to make that even more potent, more powerful. Sometimes design solutions can be very elegant in the sense that they're not in your face versus revolutionary design decisions that might be a lot of design logic and a lot of passion, but not enough understanding of what the consumer feels.
What would you recommend to a brand manager facing the challenge of seducing new generations through package design?
I had a brand manager a few months ago. We were talking about a proposition of a brand extension into a product that was going to be largely consumed by middle schoolers. So kids between 11 and 13. And I asked him, so how often have you been on TikTok? Have you been watching what they watch? Have you been consuming what they have? And so I think consumer empathy, and not in the sense of just like the feels and the emotions, but really understanding the mindset. It's less about sometimes reading the research report or listening to the trends report and being able to actually immerse yourself into that, even though it might not be your cup of tea, even though, the latest trend might not be exactly what you would do in your personal life. Staying close to the numbers and the data is super important. And I know that every brand manager has to have a super strong analytical component to their work, but also being able to go in the wild. And when I call the wild is where the brands are happening, where the experiences are happening, where that consumer universe is actually living and breathing, is almost as, if not more important when it comes to a creative decision.
How do we design brand packaging for a sustainable tomorrow?
That's such a hard question. You're going to have a different version of the answer anywhere you ask. It gives me a lot of pause to still know that there's, all of us in consumer packaged goods, design leadership roles. We do have a job that is super exciting and super interesting, but also grounded in the fact that the more our brands and our products are consumed, a lot of times there's plastic and packaging and waste being generated. And that is a really hard thing for me to sometimes grapple with and think about. It's our responsibility to, in every opportunity we have, to push for the hard points and to ask the hard questions, to be also sensitive to the fact that making creative decisions that can create an everlasting impact that includes pushing for less plastic, pushing for sustainable decisions, pushing for less disposable materials, pushing for each and every single possible thing we can, so that what we're doing, at least in some way, if we don't help, let's at least do no harm or do the least amount of harm as possible. Every little or big thing we can do will make a difference in at least doing no harm.
You are from Brazil, I am from Argentina. Do you think that Latin American designers can bring a new perspective to the world of design?
Absolutely. In so many different ways. I think the first thing is just how amazing is it that you were talking with Bruno the other day and you get to speak with so many others that are out in the world, Brazilians, South Americans, out in all parts of the world, bringing a different flavor of South American design to the planet. We talk with our hands and we feel things differently, and we grew up in crowded cities and we have loud families and we had far more color and loud noises in our childhoods. But, we have such a different outlook than anyone growing up in Switzerland or anyone growing up in New York or Nebraska or Toronto or anywhere. It has a lot to do with being able to honor where you come from and being able to truly bring where you come from to the table and not shying away from your passionate points of view and your relationship with color and everything in between, right? And how you've seen the world and not trying to convert yourself to the vision of the world that then you're part of. I'm not going to try to be an American designer. I'm not a North American designer. I'll never be. I'm not going to be a Swiss designer. I was born and raised in Brazil, went to design school in Brazil, cried through design projects. Maybe some design schools here have made people cry as well. And I think all of that is part of it. And all of it is part of what I bring to the table. And I think the more we can value and love the things that make us so fucking different than everyone else, I think the best chances the world of design has of continue to multiply and create differences in the world. Because if we are all the same, then it's going to be really, really boring.
What changes do you think we will see in the coming years in the world of brands and package design?
Consumers, they have a really, really sharp radar for bullshit. I think we see that across the world. And brands are waking up to that every single day. And brands that don't are definitely going to rush to that. Food brands, they were once upon a time really hard to create because there's a lot of cost in, making food, a factory and all of that stuff. But those barriers to entry in old SWOT analysis style, those are kind of like sort of crumbling. And we see new brands of literally anything. If you can think of it, it exists. If you think of popcorn made out of rice with caramel coating coming from macadamia nuts that are inspired by whatever, that probably is in someone's brain, and it's probably going to be in a bag somewhere at some point. So the appetite for unique experiences, the tolerance or the low tolerance for bullshit, and the responsibility that brands continue to have to tell a story that is unique, that is authentic, that is genuine, but also is not harming the planet, I believe will start giving us a very different outlook into what looks like the packaging design world in the future. You talked with someone from Loop a while ago, and that is one of the examples, and that's not even that new anymore, So we're going to see more and more of that. And then the challenge for us in the consumer brand side of thing is, how do we actually move Titanic looking like brands that move slow and they're heavy and it's hard? How do we actually move them so that they have a standing chance at being relevant when everything else is relevant?
Fe, what is your next adventure?
Professionally, I think is less important than personally. I am finally getting back into drawing and illustrating and creating for myself. And that's something that I had no idea how much I missed before the quarantine, before COVID, before all of that. I feel like a full human again, being able to have that experience that I used to have when I was in college and thought every professional designer shouldn't be acting like a child, drawing and doodling and creating, because that's not the adult thing, professional thing to do. And turns out that that's quite the opposite, that we need play and kid-like thinking so that we can be humans in creative. I hope to continue to do that so that whatever I do at Danone, with my team, by myself, that it comes from a place of genuine creativity that comes from my heart. That doesn't come from a playbook, that doesn't come from how X and Y and Z person at X and Y and Z company or agency does it, but it comes from how Faye does it. And it's really hard to do that because for the longest time, I didn't think I was mature enough or a leader enough or professional enough or designer enough to be able to have my own point of view. But I'm finally working enough through it to know that that's a whole bunch of bullshit. So that's what's in my future right now.
Fe, this was a fantastic conversation. Fe, your name means faith in Portuguese and also in Spanish. I think your contagious passion makes me have faith that design can be the force behind a human-driven change in the world. So thank you very much.
I have my hands on my heart because, as you said, that I was so thankful that I am actually talking with you, and I really appreciate your invite, and I am just very grateful to have had this time with you. Thank you so much.
I hope you have enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. You can check the episode notes for all the relevant links. I also invite you to follow me on Instagram and on my website, branderman.design. Follow the podcast in your favorite app so you don't miss the next episode of Branderman, the podcast where we try to uncover how to make a positive impact on consumers, the market, and society through package design.